All right, I want to get right into this. So this is an interview with Scott Ritter and two other people. Um, this has to be one of the most. This interview blew my mind. It's one of the most mind blowing interviews I've ever heard in my life, especially in the times that we're living in. Right. So if you want to understand the connection between why is Joe Biden, right, who is basically just an old segregationist KKK, you know, operative, slash Nazi. Why is this dusty, Jim Crow Joe Nazi in Ukraine, right? With a so-called Jewish Zion Nazi, right? Zelensky, right? With a bunch of Nazis running around in Ukraine, right? The leftovers from World War II Nazis, Ukrainian Nazis. And you say, well, what's the connection between all that, right? What's the connection between Jim Crow Joe, right? This Jim Crow Nazi, right? Uh, who wanted to keep blacks in segregation, but black people in America voted for him 3 times, which is pure insanity. Shows you why black people are going to be destroyed in America. They're not going to make it out, unfortunately. 90% of them are not going to make it out of America, and this is almost over with, right? But this interview explains to you why all this is going to happen, right? And the connection between this Jim Crow Nazi, the Zio Nazis, right? They call them neocons. They got all kinds of names for them, right? Zionists, but they're just Zion Nazis, right? The Zion Nazis was the ones that put you in slavery with the Confederacy. See, Jim Crow Joe and the Zion Nazi have always been together. Judah P. Benjamin was a Zion Nazi. He was second in command of the Confederate armies and Confederate government, right? I forget, was it Robert E. Lee was the first, or whoever, Grant, whatever one of those guys, whatever. The second in command was a Zion Nazi named Judah P. Benjamin, who led blacks into slavery in America. So Jim Crow Joe and Zelensky, a Zion Nazi, or Bibi Netanyahu, the Zion Nazis, right, have always been together in America and Europe. Sometimes they fight Hitler, World War II. See, they fight each other for power. But they've always been together. And black people have always, and other Indians, whatever, have always been under their boot. It's nothing new. This shit is not nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just that your brain, you know, has been propagandized and destroyed, right? So you don't really understand the underlying connections. That's when you see Zelensky, the Zion. They say, well, Zelensky's not a Nazi. The fuck if he ain't? Was Judah P. Benjamin a Nazi? Yeah. Wasn't he hanging out with these Confederate Nazis? You see? When you see the Confederate flags in America, what do they fly right beside them? Nazi flags. You think that's a coincidence? But anyway, let's just get into it. So let's just get into this interview and you'll see what I mean.
Yeah,
You
we
were
haven't even
looking
gotten to
at the
that.
winter offensive, and
Well,
it's kind of the stories over there. Again, not front and center. At least here I'm at anyway. I'm not seeing as much media attention. It's hard to keep track.
Gee,
you
I
know,
wonder
they're
why they're
they're
not talking about it all of a sudden, Scott.
well, they're not talking about it because it's over, and they know it's over. I mean, all you got to do is listen to Jan Stoltenberg stutter his way through his speech yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
where he said what I've been saying all along. In September, I just want to remind people, in September, I said that the Ukrainians just burned through their entire reserve force. They got nothing left, and they're out of ammunition. They don't have enough ammo, and when you don't have ammo, you die.
Apparently,
Um,
we're running out of ammunition to send them too.
well, that's what I meant. I mean,
Mhm.
so Stoltenberg sitting there, finally, the military accountant came up to him and said, "We're done." And
Go
the,
Buckers.
the Ukrainians showed up in Ramstein for I think the 10th meeting of the Ukrainian contact group, and they thought they were going to come in there and say, we need jet airplanes and we need more tanks, and you guys are going to give it to us because politically we're on the high thing. And Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley had to go time out. Now that ain't the narrative we're talking about anymore, because we got some hard truths. We're out of ammunition. We got nothing left to give you, and you're going to run out of ammunition this summer, and we can't change that outcome, and you're going to lose the war. And that's straight up what they told them. Straight up, you're going to lose the war, because without ammunition, you can't win the war, and we literally can't turn this around. Stoltenberg
Meanwhile,
said,
Russia doesn't seem to have any shortage of ammo.
no, or artillery pieces or anything. Russia just completed this big, massive mobilization, and they're getting ready to bring it to engage. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, already burned through their reserves.
So I want to stop that right there, right? So what is he letting you know? This shit is over with, right? This whole thing is over. This portion of it is over with. They can't beat the Russians, and they know it, right? So this is where it gets more dangerous, because somebody's gonna up the ante, right? And that's when we go into, a nuclear exchange, right? So they know that they're gonna lose. The Russians are certified Nazi killers. They lost 27 million people to Adolf Hitler and the Nazis during the first fight. They just getting started. These people are certified Nazi killers. They're different from like the Negro and the different, people you see. This is not Libya. It's not Somalia. It's not Iraq. These people are certified Nazi killers. You see? And they willing to sacrifice not only themselves, but the entire world. That's the difference between them and a lot of these like clowns you see around here. They willing to not only sacrifice themselves, their family, their community, their land, but the whole entire planet. Russia's already said that. Putin has already said that. He said there is no world, right? And there is no world without Russia. If you're gonna regime change and dismantle Russia, then the whole world has to go. And they meant it. That's the level of their commitment is unquestionable. You see? And so this whole thing is over. By the summer, they're gonna, finalize that. Now I wanna move on to the part of this where he starts to, I'm gonna do this in a couple of parts, where he starts to talk about, the underlying connections and the deeper connections and why this is happening. Let's get into it.
Berg was supposed to be all about, and then somehow those Nazis just kind of got away, and they immigrated to Canada, and they came to the United States, and they went to South America. And I think we only prosecuted 22 at Nuremberg.
Not enough.
Yeah, not enough.
Not enough.
Stalin did his best to hunt them down and try to get the last of them. But yeah, denazification is a bitch.
It's going to be a.
We wouldn't be here
problem
today talking about fascism in the 21st century had we done it correctly back in 1945, 46, 47. But instead, Winston Churchill decides he wants to do Operation Unthinkable.
Yeah.
And he wants to stab his ally in the back, right, and invade the Soviet Union. And then he used, and the CIA here in the United States, starting around 1947, the very beginning of the agency, started cozying up to these Ukrainian nationalists, started cozying up to Stefan Bandera, who had a CIA code name. Yep. Nikola Lebed also had a CIA code name. Alan Dulles personally recruited Lebed, brought him to the United States, set him up in New York City, where he lived a long, happy life, despite the fact that he had a murder conviction as a war criminal. And the CIA protected him. We protected a lot of them. And that's how we got here today, because they were all useful during the Cold War, doing guerrilla warfare against the Soviet Union when we were trying to destroy it and do regime change. And we're just repurposing that same old plan as far as,
But the interesting thing is,
So hopefully you got that, right? What she said. integrated the Nazis from Ukraine into America and Canada and Europe. They didn't kill them all and lock them up. They did a couple show trials, couple low level people they didn't really need, got rid of them. And then the rest of them, the technicians, the intelligence that, their brethren, they just integrated them in and said, no, we're going to do this another way. You see? But we all had the same goal. We want the Russians out. We want them dead, right? They oppose us diametrically, and the Russians we can never Nazify the Russians. For some reason, these are a group of people who will never come over, white people that will never, they don't want to subscribe to our Nazi ideology, like America, the home of their Nazi. And Ukraine is the home of the Nazis. You say, why is Joe Biden and Zelensky, why is there a train blow up with chemicals poison half of Ohio, but Joe Biden flies to Ukraine and takes pictures and gives $50 billion to a Zio-Nazi named Zelensky? Why is that? Because America and Ukraine are the home of the original Nazis, not Germany. Let me say that again for the fucking slow bus. Because you motherfuckers is slow, man. Especially you Negroes. America and Ukraine, not Germany and Hitler, is the home of the original Nazis. Are you getting that? Do you motherfuckers get it yet? Ukraine is the home of the original Nazis in Europe, not Germany. But let's continue.
The CIA was assisted by an organization called the Gehlen Organization.
Yes, sir.
Which is a Nazi intelligence officer who operated the intelligence organization on the East Front against the Soviets, and had a huge network of stay-behind assets, many of whom were Banderas, Stepan Bandera's people. And so Gehlen, a Nazi who should have been prosecuted for war crimes and killed, instead became the head of the German intelligence service, working for the CIA, etc. And so people ask, why is Germany doing this? Because it was never cleansed. Germany was never cleansed. And I get in a lot of trouble when I say this, but scratch a German, you get a Nazi.
You're absolutely right. I mean, all you have to do is study some history, and it's so obvious, so clear.
And in order to get rid of that, I mean, when you talk about the problem of denazification in Ukraine, understand, we have the problem of incomplete denazification in Germany, where many people were allowed to become mainstream in the post-war economy, in the post-war politics, the post-war military. There's a lot of German officers there in the 1950s who were, supporters of the Nazi regime in the 1940s.
Absolutely. They went on to occupy positions in government and
everywhere. You had a couple of outliers like Willy Brandt, who did the right thing. In 1972, he went to Warsaw, fell on his knees, begging forgiveness for the crimes that were committed. But a lot of Germans weren't happy about that. They weren't happy that he, showed resentment for this. And today we have literally, the nexus of German nationalism, industrialism, and militarism coming together once again to send German tanks that are named after cats over to Berlin to kill Russians.
I'm gonna have to pause that right there. I don't want to make this too long. It's kind of part one. I'm gonna do it in parts. I'm gonna do a bust down on some of what else he had to say. But right here, it's just mind blowing when you listen to what they're saying. They're breaking down and giving you an analysis of how historically this whole thing came to be where we are in 2023 with the rise of the Fourth Reich, right? We're from Hitler and World War II, but it goes beyond. Like I said, it goes beyond that. You have to understand the Nazis didn't start with Hitler. Hitler and Germany weren't the original Nazis. Ukrainians and Americans are the original Nazis, not Hitler. The Ukrainians, Americans, and these Zio-Nazis, these Jewish Nazis are the original Nazis, not Hitler. So when they point at Zelensky, this is our Nazis, or Bibi Netanyahu, who's bombing the shit out of people who can't fight back in Palestine, and they said, well, these people can't be Nazis. That's total bullshit. That's news for the uninformed. That's statements for the uninformed. Intelligent people understand the original Nazis in America was Judah P. Benjamin and these Confederate Nazis, and the rest of them, and Abraham Lincoln and the rest of them, right? These was all Nazis, right? Ukraine was the home. He's going to go into that. In part 2, I'm going to go into that, but I don't want to make this too long. But in part 2, I'm going to go into Ukraine being the home of the original Nazis, not Germany. Ukraine and America and the Zion Nazis. And I'm going to really dig into that, right, in part 2. But that's all I got for this one.